Overnight, the Israeli military carried out airstrikes against Gaza in response to rockets fired into Israel. The tension escalating in the region after clashes broke out following the death of a Palestinian teenager in East Jerusalem. Police are investigating the death. Palestinians say, though, the boy was murdered in retaliation for the killings of 3 Israeli teens in the West Bank. Let's bring in Diana Boutou. She's a former legal advisor to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and former legal advisor and spokeswoman for the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. Diana, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate.
Of course. I mean, violence, you know this better than anybody, violence between Israelis and Palestinians, this unfortunately is not new, but you do wonder when you see those pictures of those boys' faces, those 4 young boys, when and why did it get to a point that killing innocent teenagers was part of this?
The big problem, Kate, is that nobody is really looking at the root causes of the violence. And this isn't violence for the sake of violence. Unfortunately, it comes within a political context, which is 47 years of the denial of freedom of Palestinians. When it came to this latest attack on this young boy whose body was torched, it was not only the fact of the denial of freedom, but the fact that the Israeli government went out of its way to incite Israelis to violence. It was everything from the Israeli Prime Minister calling for revenge to Israeli ministers also calling for blood, and so it's unsurprising that we end up seeing that a young 16-year-old boy is kidnapped and then killed.
Everyone from both angles was calling for no one to take the law into their own hands. Prime Minister has called for calm. Secretary of State John Kerry has called for calm. Everyone they've condemned this violence on these teenagers. There's no excuse for the killing of teenagers in response to violence that's been going on for 40 years.
Absolutely, and this is why, in terms of how this scenario has played out, you can't, on the one hand, call for revenge, and then on the other hand, say that you don't condone violence. The big problem is that when it came to these 3 Israelis, that there were calls by Palestinians for an investigation to actually look into what was happening. Palestinians were also investigating themselves, independent of the Israelis, what had happened to these 3 Israelis, and yet what the Israeli response was to simply impose collective punishment on Palestinians, whether it was through the bombing of the Gaza Strip, raiding of Palestinian areas, and killing 11 Palestinians. So the problem is that unless we get to the root causes of it, which is the denial of freedom, then we're going to continue to see this spiral out of control.